There are beginnings that feel like memories, moments so quiet and eternal that they seem to exist outside of time itself, as if we've lived them before, in another dream, another life. Ocarina of Time begins in one of those moments. Before the wars, before the temples, before the legends that would shape generations, there is only a light breaking through the canopy of a forest. A child sleeps. The world still holds its breath. And then, a voice. A whisper carried on the wind in memory, calling the child to awaken. That call is not just the start of a game. It's the beginning of a consciousness. The first sound that pulls the innocent from a dream into the ache of awareness. Before Hyrule, there was only story. The goddesses, Din, Nehru, and Furor. They descended and shaped the world, each gifting a fragment of themselves, power, wisdom, and courage. When their work was done, they departed, leaving behind the Triforce, a sacred equation that would govern balance, destiny, and the fragile heartbeat of history. But the Triforce was never meant to be owned. It's a reflection of creation itself, perfect only in harmony, catastrophic. But the Triforce was never meant to be owned. It was a reflection of creation itself, perfect only in harmony, catastrophic when divided. Ocarina of Time begins in the shadows of that divine arithmetic. A kingdom born from symmetry, already trembling beneath the weight of imbalance. Because even in paradise, there is the seed of division, the whisper of inevitable fall. Link's story begins in the forest, a garden untouched by time, where the air smells of dew and the days never change. The Kokiri never grow old. They never die. They live in perfect innocence, a parody of Eden, if you will. And yet even here, something feels off. Link dreams of storms, of darkness, of a princess and a tower, and the cry of thunder through stone. He doesn't know it yet, but the dream is truth disguised as prophecy. Because the world outside the forest has already begun to move. That's the tragedy of childhood. The moment you realize the walls that protected you are also the ones that trapped you. The call of the fairy, Navi, is the sound of innocence ending. Not a gift, but a summons. The same way a bell calls the faithful to worship or the condemned to trial. The Great Deku Tree is the first deity Link encounters. Ancient, rooted, omniscient, but dying. He is both nature and conscious, creation and decay. His words are not comfort, they are a burden. Thou must take up this task. It's not a request. It's the voice of fate itself, speaking through bark and breath. And so the first lesson of Ocarina of Time is whispered beneath his branches. To be chosen is not to be blessed. It is to be obligated. When the Deku Tree dies, the camera lingers on his still form, his mouth open as if frozen mid-prayer. The forest mourns, but also continues. The child's heart breaks, but he must move forward. Because time has begun to flow again, and time does not stop for grief. Stepping out of the forest into Hyrule Field is one of the most transcendent moments in gaming history. Not for its scale, though, but for its symbolism. It is crossing from myth to reality, from sanctuary to consequence. The sunlight burns bright, the music swells, and for a brief moment, it feels like freedom. But look closer and you'll see the cracks already forming. The world is divided by class, by tribe, by faith. The Gerudo to the west, the Zora to the east, the Gorons in their mountain, and the Hylians ruling from their castle. A kingdom balanced only by ignorance of its own instability, and at its center, a man who already covets the sacred triangle. Ganondorf, the king of thieves. His ambition isn't greed, it's revelation. He sees what others deny, that power is the only constant truth in a world made by gods who abandoned it. Zelda dreams the same dream as Link, a storm, a darkness, a sword drawn in light. When they meet, it's not fate, it's recognition. They are two halves of the same prophecy, two children who see the cracks in paradise. Their faith in each other is immediate, absolute, and doomed. Because prophecy does not create friendship, it consumes it. Zelda believes she can manipulate destiny through foresight. Link believes he can master it through action. And both are wrong. And the ocarina, her gift to him, is not a weapon, it's a prayer. A fragile instrument meant to hold the weight of eternity in a handful of notes. If the great Deku Tree was the first god, the Temple of Time is the last. It's not a place of worship, it's a machine. A mechanism built to measure worth. 3 stones, 3 virtues, 1 gate. The formula of divinity distilled into architecture. And when Link places the final stone and draws the Master Sword, he does not ascend to glory. He's sealed away. 7 years vanish. The boy becomes a man, and in that instant, the world dies. When Link awakens, the kingdom he meant to save is gone. Hyrule Castle has crumbled. The market is a graveyard. The temple, once holy, is now a mausoleum. He was asleep, dreaming of heroism, while time carried on without him. And that's the true tragedy of Ocarina of Time. It's not about evil conquering good. It's about what's lost while we wait to become who we're supposed to be. The 7 years between childhood and adulthood, between promise and fulfillment, are not a passage of triumph, but of grief. Because time, once mastered, becomes cruel. It shows us what we missed, what we can never recover, and it whispers, as it always does, you were too late. There's a certain kind of memory that hurts to hold, not because it was tragic, but because it was perfect. The kind of perfection that only exists before you understand what true loss is. That's what the Kokiri Forest represents. A world without endings, an eternal mourning, a garden before the fruit was eaten. For Link, it's home, but not belonging. Because unlike the others, he doesn't share their stillness. He dreams, he wanders. He feels time moving even when no one else can. And that's the quiet cruelty of paradise. It only feels perfect to those who never question it. Everywhere you look in Kokiri Forest, things repeat. Children play the same games. Fairies float in the same circles. The music loops endlessly, cheerful, fragile, and hypnotic. It's the soundtrack of eternity, comforting and suffocating at once. Because eternity, for those trapped in it, is not peace, it's paralysis. The Kokiri never age, they never change, they never die, at least not in front of us. They're not people, they're memories of people, echoes of what childhood feels like from a distance, frozen in laughter, forever at play, never aware that they're shadows. That's why Link is different. He feels time. He senses decay. He is the only living thing in a world that has stopped living. Now, when Navi comes for him, It's not a rescue. It's an interruption, a disruption of the closed circle. Her wings shimmer like light through tears. Her voice trembles not with joy, but urgency. The great Deku Tree has summoned you. It's not a call to adventure. It's the sound of a door closing behind you. The world will never be small again. And that's what makes Ocarina of Time so enduring. It's not a story about becoming a hero. It's a story about the grief of leaving innocence behind and knowing you can never return. Now, every mythology needs a witness. Someone who remembers the version of you that existed before the legend began. Soraya is that witness. She is the embodiment of unconditional love, not romantic, not tragic, but pure recognition. She sees Link not as a savior, but as a boy who once climbed trees and played songs in the sunlight. When she gives him the ocarina, it's not a gift. It's an anchor, something to hold on to as time begins to move too fast. Because even the purest love becomes a burden when eternity separates you. When she says goodbye, it isn't final, but it feels like death, because innocent always dies quietly, not with screams, but with acceptance. Every garden and myth ends the same way, with exile. Paradise cannot coexist with awareness. The moment you see the world as it truly is, you're cast out of it. When Link leaves the forest, the sun feels too bright, the grass too vast, the sky too wide. Freedom, it turns out, is terrifying. But that's what growing up is. A realization that the world's beauty comes with weight, that joy exists beside decay, that the gods, in their wisdom, built no walls that last forever. In Majora's Mask, time was the oppressor, a ticking clock. But in Ocarina of Time, time is still young, still innocent, still divine. It's the act of creation, the moment when potential becomes motion. To be chosen by the gods is to be given the power to move through it, and the burden to watch everything else left behind. When the Deku Tree dies, he passes that burden on. Go to the Hyrule Castle. There thou shalt find the princess destined to rule the world. It sounds like destiny. It's really displacement. The first wound of purpose. The idea that you must abandon the life you have to become who you're meant to be. That's what makes Ocarina of Time not just a story, but a theology. It treats time as both salvation and exile. Every act of growing is an act of separation. Every act of becoming is a kind of loss. The brilliance of Ocarina of Time is that it never tells you when childhood ends. It just lets you feel it slipping away. You still swing your sword, collect rupees, solve puzzles, but the music begins to change. The laughter fades from the forest. Even the sky feels heavier. Because what you're really collecting isn't rupees or power, it's understanding. And understanding is the beginning of sorrow. That's what Link carries when he leaves the Kokiri Forest. Not hope, not destiny, but grief. A grief he doesn't yet have words for. It's the same grief we all carry when we realize that the world we loved was temporary, and that love itself is bound by time. Every time, though, you revisit Kokiri Forest later in the game, something feels off. It's smaller than you remember, darker. The laughter is stopped. That's the moment when nostalgia becomes horror. When you realize that paradise didn't change, you did. Because that's what time does. It doesn't take things away. It just moves them beyond our reach. The garden is still there, somewhere in memory, still green, still bright. But you can never walk back into it as the same person. The child has left the garden. The story has begun, and time at last begins to move forward. The Temple of Time is not just a building, it's the still point of the universe, a cathedral built to measure the soul. Every stone, every beam of light, every echoing note of the Song of Time is a prayer carved into its architecture. It's the house of destiny, but it feels like a tomb. When Link enters, the world feels heavy. The child who once ran through the fields now walks with reverence, as if he knows, on some instinct deeper than thought, that he is crossing the threshold between who he was and who he must become. The Master Sword stands at the center of it all, beautiful, patient, and silent. It's the closest thing Hyrule has to divinity, and yet, like every god, it demands a sacrifice. When Link draws the sword, the world holds its breath, the music swells into silence, and time folds. What he expects is power, but what he receives is absence. 7 years have vanished. He awakens not as a hero, but as a stranger. That's the weight of the sword, not its edge, but its consequence. It cuts through time as easily as flesh, dividing childhood from adulthood, memory from reality, dream from duty. That 7-year sleep is not rest, it's suspension. Link isn't preserved in stasis, he's forgotten. And when he wakes, the world has paid the price for his destiny. Hyrule Castle is gone. The market is filled with the living dead. The Temple of Time is cracked and cold. Time, the very thing he sought to control, has punished him for his hubris. It's a cruel irony, really. The gift of foresight becomes the curse of witness. He's not a savior awakened. He's a child resurrected into ruin. That's what makes his story divine. It's not a tale of triumph, but of consequence, of what happens when innocence meets eternity. Every kingdom and myth eventually falls, but few fall so quietly. There's no great war, no divine cataclysm, just time, patient and merciless. Ganondorf's victory is not through conquest, but through persistence. He waits, he corrupts, he fills that void left by the silence. When the gods retreat, the void hungers for meaning, and evil, in its purest form, is simply meaning twisted by pain. Ganondorf isn't the devil. His belief's gone wrong. He's the echo of power, worshipped without wisdom or courage to balance it. And so Hyrule decays, not because of his hatred, but because of the people's apathy. They prayed for the gods to return, but gods never return. They only leave relics, symbols, and stories. So what happens in those 7 years? The game doesn't show us. It doesn't really have to, because the silence between them says everything. It's the silence between childhood and adulthood, the gap between who we imagine we'll become and who we actually are. That's what makes this sequence universal. We all pull the sword at some point in our lives. We all awaken to a world we don't recognize, a self we didn't expect. The temples you must now purify are not just dungeons. They are memories of the 7 years you missed, the ghosts of possibilities you'll never reclaim. And each sage you awaken is a person you failed to save. Each one stands as both a witness and a wound. By this point, Ocarina of Time stops pretending to be a story about victory. It becomes a story about surrender. Link doesn't conquer time. He's consumed by it. Every step he takes is one deeper into isolation, one further from the laughter of the Kokiri Forest. Even his victories are hollow. Each temple he cleanses reveals another layer of decay. Each soul he saves reminds him that he's already too late. The legend calls him the hero of time, but what he really becomes is its victim. A Christ-like figure who must die not once, but perpetually in every moment he tries to hold on to the world he once knew. That's what makes this story sacred. It understands that salvation always costs the self. Every time Link returns to the Temple of Time, the sword awaits, silent, gleaming, patient. It's no longer a weapon, it's a covenant, a promise between him and the gods that he will bear the burden of balance even when it breaks him. But there's another truth hidden here. The sword can't be wielded by a child. It rejects innocence. It demands understanding. In that way, the Master Sword is not just divine, it's cruel. It represents the divine belief that enlightenment is worth the cost of peace. It's the same trade that every adult makes when they awaken from childhood. The loss of wonder in exchange for knowledge. And the more you know, the heavier the sword becomes. By now, Link has become both priest and sacrifice, a bridge between divine time and mortal life. He carries no prophecy anymore, only memory. He doesn't fight for destiny. He fights because he remembers what it felt like when the world was whole. That's the real power of the Master Sword, not its light, but its remembrance. It cuts through illusion to reveal what was lost. It is time made solid, faith made tangible, a God you can hold in your hands. And every time Link swings it, it's not rage that guides him, it's grief. Because somewhere deep down, he knows what all heroes must know, that the world he's fighting to restore will never be what it was. Eventually, the hero learns what the gods already knew, that there is no such thing as a timeless victory, only the brief balance between destruction and renewal. That's the weight of the sword. It isn't just metal, it's time itself, solidified and sharpened, asking one unending question. Can you still love the world, even when it changes without you? That's the true test of the hero of time. Not whether he can save Hyrule, but whether he can forgive it. When Link steps out of the Temple of Time, he doesn't enter a battlefield. He enters a graveyard. The market, once bright, filled with song and motion, is now still. The fountains are dry. The laughter that once filled the air has become the shuffling of the dead. Every story about destiny hides this part. The moment after the awakening, when the world you were meant to save no longer exists. The hero returns, but there's no homecoming, only ruins waiting to be understood. And that's where Ocarina of Time changes forever. From adventure to elegy, it becomes less about saving the kingdom and more about walking through its aftermath, because every miracle leaves behind a shadow. And the hero, at last, must walk through his own. Faith is easy when the gods still speak, when the sky answers prayers and miracles come on command. But when the temples crumble and the sacred songs echo through empty halls, faith becomes something else entirely. The sages you awaken do not speak of hope, they speak of duty. They do not promise paradise, only balance. And balance in Ocarina of Time is rarely merciful. Each sage you free thanks you with solemn reverence, as if they too understand that what you've done cannot be undone, that you've rescued them not from evil, but from stasis. It's the paradox of redemption. Every act of salvation is also an admission of loss. In childhood, Link was never alone. Every corner of Kokiri Forest had a friend. Every discovery came with laughter. Every risk was shared. Now, every sound echoes back to him. Adulthood Ocarina of Time says it isn't freedom, it's distance. Distance from innocence, from safety, from the people who once knew your name. The world has grown larger, but the spaces between things have grown infinite. You travel from mountain to lake to desert, surrounded by scale and silence. The music grows sparse, the towns grow emptier. The temples echo like cathedrals left to rot. And through it all, Link says nothing. He listens. Because maybe that's what maturity really is. Not understanding, but listening to what you can't change. And no place in this game captures the silence better than the water temple. It's a labyrinth of mirrors and still water, a monument to introspection and futility. Players remember it for frustration, but frustration is the point. It's what happens when movement no longer brings progress, when every solution feels like regression. You raise and lower the water levels again and again, and it still feels like drowning, because the water temple isn't a puzzle, it's a confession, a mirror of the human soul, beautiful, calm, and endlessly recursive. In its depths waits Dark Link, the most haunting encounter in the entire series. He awaits in a featureless room, reflected in the surface of the water. No dialogue, no music, no reason. Just you and yourself. Every myth needs its reflection, every god its shadow. Dark Link is not evil. He's memory given shape. The boy you left behind, standing in judgment. You swing your sword, but it's like striking water. He moves as you move. He anticipates. He knows. And when you finally defeat him, he doesn't fall. He simply dissolves. No scream, no curse, just disappearance, like a thought forgotten. That's the most unsettling thing about the scene. You don't win. You just outlast the part of yourself that still believed in innocence. It's the most honest metaphor for adulthood I've ever seen. Later, in the Shadow Temple, you face a different truth. Not reflection, but revelation. The temple's walls are built from bone. The air hums with whispers. The rooms twist like entrails. Here, the game reveals what lies beneath Hyrule's holiness. Centuries of cruelty, sacrifice, and forgotten sin. The temple doesn't hide evil. It exposes it. It says, this is what your peace was built on. The heroes, the sages, the kings, the gods, all of them are complicit. That's what makes Ocarina of Time more than a legend. It's theology with dirt under its nails. It acknowledges that light without shadow is just blindness. And when you emerge, blinking into daylight, you're not the same. Because once you've seen the darkness beneath paradise, you can't pretend it's not there. The Spirit Temple stands in the desert, the boundary between past and present, innocent and wisdom, male and female, God and mortal. It's the only temple that requires both child and adult Link to complete. Because it's the only one that understands both must exist. The child cannot save the world alone, and the adult cannot remember why he wanted to. When you return to the desert as a child, the sand feels endless. Every grain a moment you can never reclaim. And when you enter again as an adult, it's not nostalgia you feel, it's reconciliation. The two selves finally meet, not as enemies, but as partners. The boy who left the forest and the man who lost it. Together they finish what neither could alone. That's the quiet redemption of Ocarina of Time. You can't restore innocence, but you can honor it. You can't undo time, but you can understand it. By now, the gods are gone. They don't speak. They don't intervene. They simply watch. Or perhaps they don't even watch at all. And yet Link keeps going. He prays with every song he plays, every life he saves, every silence he endures. He's not faithful because he believes. He's faithful because he continues. And that's the highest form of devotion, persistence without promise. The kind of faith that doesn't ask to be rewarded, only to be allowed to go on. When the sages finally gather, they call him the hero of time. But that title feels more like a eulogy than an honor, because time by now has taken everything from him. Twilight isn't the end of the day. It's the hour when the light remembers the dark. And that's where Link lives now, between past and present, between the child he was and the savior he must be. He's not a god. He's not even a man. He's a memory walking, carrying the ache of everything he's seen. The kingdom waits for dawn, but the hero knows dawn always comes with a cost. Because every sunrise casts a new shadow, and every act of creation begins with destruction. Long before the story began, 3 goddesses descended from the heavens to shape the world. Din carved the earth with her flame. Nehru poured wisdom into its rivers. Furor filled it with life and courage. And when their work was done, they left behind their mark, 3 golden triangles that would preserve balance, the sacred geometry of existence itself. It is said that whoever touches the Triforce will have their deepest nature made manifest. But the goddess never meant for mortals to hold it whole, because no single being can contain balance. To possess one piece is to bear both its gift and its curse. That's the truth at the heart of Ocarina of Time. 3 souls divided by faith and joined by flaw, each carrying one fragment of the divine and each doomed to misunderstand it. Zelda is the mind of the world, not the ruler of it. Her gift is foresight, but foresight is not salvation. It's anxiety dressed as knowledge. She sees what will come, and that sight destroys her innocence. She dreams of the storm and fire, of the castle falling, of her kingdom consumed by shadow. When she meets Link, she sees in him the possibility of balance, courage to counter her doubt. But she also sees the inevitability of tragedy. Because prophecy is never a gift, it's a curse. To know what must be done and to be powerless to prevent it, that is wisdom's burden. That's why she hides. She becomes chic, cloaking herself in ritual and restraint. She watches the world crumble from behind veils of silence. Her wisdom protects her body, but it costs her humanity. When she finally reveals herself, it's not a victory, it's a confession. I was afraid. And that's the true nature of wisdom, not intellect, but the humility that follows fear. Courage is not fearlessness, it's movement through fear. Link embodies the will of the living, the instinct to keep going when all logic says stop. His courage isn't divine, it's biological. It's the heartbeat refusing to quit. He acts without promise of reward, without prophecy, without applause. He acts because the world needs him to. But courage, left unchecked, becomes recklessness. It destroys as often as it saves. That's why his victories feel hollow, because he never gets to rest in them. The moment one crisis ends, another begins. Every act of bravery pulls him further from peace. The sword he carries doesn't shine for glory. It shines for duty. And duty in its purest form is love, stripped of pleasure, stripped of outcome, stripped even of hope. And that's the paradox of courage. It saves the world, but sacrifices the self. Ganondorf is the world's shadow, the body of its hunger, power made human. He isn't evil for wanting strength. He's evil for believing that strength alone can heal the world's wounds. He comes from the desert, where the sun burns and the gods do not answer. His people live in scarcity, forgotten by the golden kingdom they helped sustain. His envy, then, isn't petty, it's theological. He looks at Hyrule, at its green fields, its overflowing rivers, its golden halls, and sees injustice made holy. So he decides to become God himself, not to destroy creation, but to correct it. That's what makes him terrifying. He doesn't want chaos. He wants order on his own terms. When he finally grasps the Triforce, it fractures in his hands. He receives power, but not balance. The rest flee. Wisdom to Zelda, courage to Link. It's divine irony. The universe dividing itself to protect itself. The Trinity scattered across the very souls that will destroy each other, trying to reunite it. Each of them is incomplete. Each carries a piece of creation's equation, and each one misuses it in their own way. Zelda's wisdom leads her to manipulation, the arrogance of knowing too much. Ganondorf's power leads him to tyranny, the arrogance of believing control equals care. Link's courage leads him to martyrdom, the arrogance of thinking sacrifice alone can fix what's broken. Together they form a divine paradox, three virtues that cannot exist apart and yet destroy each other when combined. The gods created the Triforce to represent balance, but balance is impossible while human, because to be human is to be biased, to lean towards one virtue at the expense of another. That's why this cycle never ends. That's why every age must have its hero, its tyrant, and its prophet. They're not enemies. They are functions. Their final battle isn't just for a kingdom. It's for equilibrium. When Link faces Ganondorf, he's not fighting a man. He's confronting power itself, raw and divine. And when Zelda prays, sealing them in light, she isn't aiding him. She's officiating the ritual, the endless struggle between might, mind, and heart. Every strike of Link's sword, every pulse of Ganondorf's flame, every note of Zelda's prayer is a verse in the creation's liturgy. They are repeating what the goddesses began: destruction as renewal, struggle as faith. And when Ganondorf falls, the world breathes again. But the wound remains, because balance isn't achieved through victory. It's achieved through remembrance. When it's over, the sages celebrate. The sky clears. The Triforce gleams once more. But look closely. It flickers. Its edges tremble. It's whole, but not stable. Because perfection, even divine perfection, is unsustainable. That's the true revelation of Ocarina of Time. That even the gods built a world designed to break. They didn't fail. They made it fragile on purpose. Because fragility is what gives life meaning. If the Triforce could be held without consequence, it would be meaningless. If Hyrule could last forever, it would become stagnant. If heroes never died, their courage would turn to pride. Divinity, the game suggests, lies not in permanence, but in the will to begin again. In the aftermath, Zelda and Link stand together, not as lovers, but as witnesses. They've seen the face of the divine and understood that it's not benevolent or cruel. It's neutral. It simply is. When Zelda sends Link back to his own time, she does so not out of mercy, but necessity. He doesn't belong in this era anymore. He's become part of its myth. And she, burdened by wisdom, knows that the only kindness left is to let him forget. So, she plays the Song of Time, not to restore, but to release. And for one brief instant, everything is still. The world breathes. The divine triangles fade, and time folds inward, like hands in a prayer. The story ends where all stories do, in silence. The hero has returned the sword. The princess has fulfilled the prophecy. The kingdom, for now, is at peace. And yet, something lingers. A feeling that none of this was truly real. Or perhaps that reality itself was only ever a dream dreamt by time. Because what is a legend, if not a memory that refused to fade? And what is memory? It's not a kind of time travel, one that lets us return to what no longer exists. That's the paradox of the Ocarina of Time. It doesn't end with triumph or tragedy. It ends with recollection. A child returning home. A song played once more. A feeling, not of victory, but of completion. When Zelda sends Link back to his childhood, it isn't restoration, it's release. The act of returning him to a moment that can no longer contain him. The Temple of Time is still pristine, the kingdom still whole, but something's changed. The music is slower, the air feels heavier, the colors are softer, muted, touched by melancholy. Because the boy who stands there is not the same one who left. He carries the memory of endings, and that memory is a burden no child should bear. He walks again among the Kokiri, but the laughter no longer sounds right. He plays the ocarina, but the notes echo a little differently. He looks at Saraya, and she smiles, unaware that, somewhere in another timeline, she has already become a sage. That's the quiet horror of memory. Knowing more than the world around you, and carrying ghosts that no one else can see. We often think of memory as comfort, as something we can return to for warmth. But Ocarina of Time understands the other truth, that remembering can also be a form of grief. To remember is to live twice, once in the present and once in the past, and to feel the space between them widen with every breath. Link becomes the first person in Hyrule's history to truly experience the passage of time. Everyone else lives within it. He alone moves through it. And so he becomes the bearer of continuity, the first mortal to remember eternity. That's not what makes his legend holy, not the monsters he defeated, but the memories he carried. Not the gods he served, but the humanity he preserved. He becomes the memory of time itself, the proof that meaning survives even when the world forgets. The ocarina has always been more than an instrument. It's the vessel of time, a relic that turns sound into eternity. Every song is a memory made audible. The song of storms, the song of healing, the lullaby. Each carries the echo of a place, a person, a moment already lost. When Link plays, he's not commanding time, he's communing with it. He speaks to the fabric of memory itself, asking it to open just long enough to let him pass. And that's what makes the ocarina's tone so haunting. It's not music, it's mourning, a lament for what once was and never will be again. Every legend ends the same way. The hero disappears, the world rebuilds, and the people forget. That's not tragedy, it's design. Because if the hero stayed, there would be no reason for others to rise. If memory never faded, there would be no room for new stories to grow. Link's disappearance at the end of Ocarina of Time isn't death. It's transfiguration. He leaves the stage of history and becomes something quieter, a myth, a melody, a presence that can be felt but not seen. And in that silence, the cycle begins again. That's how time works in Hyrule. Not as a straight line, but as a song that must be replayed to stay alive. Each generation hears its echo, hums along, and adds a note of its own. In the end, Ocarina of Time is not about saving the world. It's about understanding that the world never truly needed saving. It needed remembering. Every ruin, every temple, every song is an act of preservation, a way of saying, this happened. It mattered. Because what are we, if not the sum of the stories we keep alive? What are gods, if not the echoes of faith spoken too often to disappear? Time may destroy everything, but memory gives destruction shape. It turns the fleeting into eternal. It turns the end into the beginning. And that, perhaps, is the secret the gods tried to teach all along, that eternity isn't found by escaping time, but by cherishing it. The last image is quiet. No fanfare, no triumph, just peace. Zelda stands in the garden. Link approaches. The ocarina rests between them. They say nothing. They don't need to, because some truths are beyond speech. They can only be lived, remembered, and eventually released. As the camera pulls back, the world shines for a moment. Not perfect, but whole. The kind of wholeness that comes not from victory, but from acceptance. That's the final gift of Ocarina of Time. It teaches us that time will take everything, our innocence, our faith, our certainty, and still somehow leave enough light for another dawn. Stories end, games fade, consoles break, but some moments stay. That first step into Hyrule Field, the pull of the Master Sword, the melody that feels like a memory itself. Those aren't nostalgia, they're sacraments. Rituals we perform every time we remember who we were when we first heard them. And that's why Ocarina of Time endures. Not because it's perfect, not because it's changed gaming, but because it reminds us of the sacred truth that all creation shares. That time will end, but meaning will not. That every ending is also an echo, and that some songs, the right songs, never stop playing. Now, before we close this chapter, I just want to say thank you, genuinely. Thank you for taking this journey with me, for sitting with these memories, these silences, these echoes of a game that shaped so many of us in ways we didn't fully understand at the time. Ocarina of Time isn't just a story I wanted to analyze. It's a story I wanted to sit with, one I wanted to feel again, slowly, honestly, the way it first lived in us when we were younger. And knowing you were here with me for that, it truly does mean a lot. If this reflection resonated with you, if it brought back a feeling, a memory, or even a quiet ache you hadn't named before, then I hope you'll stay with me for what comes next. There are so many other Legend of Zelda games I want to explore in the same way, thoughtfully, patiently, honoring not just their lore, but the emotions and meaning they carry. If you'd like to continue this journey together, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed, not just to support the channel, but to be a part of these conversations as we move forward. One story, one song, one memory at a time. So thank you for being here, and thank you for listening.